Audi anticipates the Q4 e-tron will be one of its best sellers, and in this review we'll be seeing if it's actually worth its price tag. Now in the UK and at the time of filming, there are three different trim levels. The 35 line, which has a smaller battery pack and that starts from roughly £40,000. The larger battery pack variant, which we have on review, the 40 line, starts from £44,000, and then you've got the dual motor configuration, which is the 50 line, and that starts from roughly £51,000. And if you want some detailed information between the breakdown of these, do check out our written review that goes in a little bit more detail. It'll be down description below or in the pinned comments. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about its exterior design, and here I really love what Audi have done, specifically with the launch edition that we have on review today. Here the 20-inch alloys really blend in well with the rest of the sporty type of look of the vehicle. Indeed, you do have 19-inch alloys which come as standard in the cheaper trims and 21-inch alloys in the more expensive or sportier trims. Now elsewhere, I do like the fact that the automaker has integrated painted wheel arches and side skirts, and while this might seem trivial to some competitors offer plastic wheel arches instead, and therefore it just doesn't look as nice. As for the front, it's got this kind of cute type of design, at least what I feel or when I compare it to other rivals out there on the market. And while its grille might seem very large, specifically if you don't have a number plate on it, once you do have the number plate and indeed the Audi logo there, it actually does blend well with the rest of the design of the vehicle. Now as for the rear, it does have that futuristic e-tron look, and that's namely due to the fact of the tail lights, not only due to their design but also how they stretch around from the entirety of the boot. Now speaking about the lights, I should also mention that the model that we have has got the matrix LED system, so therefore at the front the headlights have a slightly different design from what you would find in terms of its stock configuration. And not only does this add to the overall light and therefore gives you a little bit more confidence if you're driving at night, but it also does look quite stylish, and I just thought to comment on that. The same could be said about the taillights, by the way. I just think that they've done a phenomenal job. Now its exterior design is sublime, and the same could be said about its interior, although much could be said about other Audi vehicles out there on the market where they give you a nice sort of premium look and feel, and the Q4 e-tron is no different in this department. As for the steering wheel, it's got a cut-off top and bottom. That's a £285 option. It's fitted as standard in the launch model, although I do quite like it because it's kind of reminiscent of a go-kart. It's very similar to the likes of the Peugeot E208 or let's say the Citroën EC4 as well. Now however, unlike its other rivals, it is worth bearing in mind that here Audi have integrated physical and touch-based inputs. Now the touch-based input, in my opinion, is definitely not appreciated. I understand it might be quite useful to swipe around certain features. However, when it comes to using it and practicality, if you're twisting the steering wheel in a certain way, it might actuate a wrong setting, and I found that to be the case on my drives. Now elsewhere, when it comes to using the vehicle, what I find is the gear selector is a little bit of arm's reach. I've got pretty long arms, and yet even then I do feel it's a little bit of an arm's reach and sometimes I have to lean forwards a little bit. Same could be said about the start stop button, and even more could be said about the drive select, which is fitted on this model, meaning that I can switch between the comfort or sport modes, but here I really do have to lean forwards in order to select that button. Now on the subject of buttons, it's nice to see that we do have physical climate control buttons. That is quite a rarity nowadays and isn't the case with other Volkswagen vehicles at the market, so I'm glad that they've retained it. It's the same that could have been said about the e-tron GT. If you want to see that review, by the way, it'll be up on your pop-up banner. Now when it comes to technology, the Q4 e-tron has a 10.1 inch display. It's 11.6 inch as an option in certain markets as well, and here it supports multi-touch input. It's very vivid and it's very comprehensively laid out as well, so it's very easy to get your head around it. Elsewhere, it supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as well, and they're both available in a wired and wireless format, which is a nice little touch. Now when it comes to wireless connectivity, you do have Bluetooth with the SBC and AAC codecs that are supported, and this perfectly leads me onto the audio system. Now for those who are subscribed, you'll know I do dedicated audio reviews, and there's one for the Q4 e-tron, so do check it up on your pop-up banner down in the description or in the pinned comments. And here the model that we have on review has the Sonos system. It's actually the first Sonos system in any vehicle. Now what I will say in a nutshell is that it's decent, although some audiophiles will be quite disappointed at the fact that the mid-range does feel a little bit more recessed. Now keeping on the subject of technology, I do have to talk about the instrument cluster, and here it's a 10.25 inch display. It's It's very vivid and it can be customized to a certain degree as well, very much like other Audi vehicles on the market. I have no issues whatsoever. Now, I do also have to point out the head-up display. Now, it's fitted as standard in the launch edition that we've got over here. It's available in option as well on the other trims. And here it not only does portray the right information that you want, so for example speed or let's say the safety assistance, but it also integrates augmented reality. And where is that useful? Well, when it comes to let's say lane assist and you are veering off piste, what it will do is it will show you the line where it's figuring out that you are going off. And that is very small little integration, but one that's definitely appreciated and adds to the overall driving experience, specifically on the motorway. Now, moving swiftly on, we get onto storage within the cabin, and here underneath the overarching center console unit, you've got a non-slip bay for let's say a smartphone or some loose change. You've also got a wireless mobile charger as well over here with a phone holder, which is quite handy. And then you've got two Type-C ports to connect up to the infotainment system or indeed provide power. And then you've got a 12-volt socket as well to let's say plug in a dash cam. And if you want our best roundup, by the way, it'll be down in the description below. Moving down the center console, you've got two cup holders and then a compartment found within the center armrest, which is large enough for a medium to small size purse or wallet. Now, if you want some more storage, you've got the glove compartment and then you've got the door bins. It's actually quite nice to see that the door bins can fit two 500ml bottles, one in the regular door bin compartment and one over here towards the upper segment where you can fit another 500ml bottle. It's a nice little design implementation in my opinion. As for the rear door bins, they're a little bit more limited but still plenty large for your rear occupants. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot. It can be accessed through a button found just above the number plate within the cabin and of course through the remote. As it's an electric tailgate that can fit it as standard, there's a button to easily close it and it's at arm's reach. Now, I'm just under 6 foot and I have no issues with its kind of hatchback design, so therefore it's quite easy to load in and out goods. Furthermore, the same could be said because it's got a very low boot lip and rear seats can be folded flat, which is a definite plus point. Now, I should just mention that we have got a 40-20-40 split in the model on review, although as standard you do have a 60-40 split instead. Now, with the seats folded down, you do have 1,490 litres, which is seriously impressive, and with them even propped up, you still have a very usable 520 litres at your disposal. By comparison, this is very similar to the VW ID.4, although it's no match to the likes of the Skoda Enyaq iV. However, on the flip side, the Q4 e-tron does offer much more space than the likes of the Mercedes EQA or the Hyundai Kona Electric. Now, elsewhere, I do really like the fact that the German automaker has integrated a great underfloor compartment storage space. This is pretty large to stow away goods and of course your charging cables as well. There's side compartments as well, which are also pretty handy to have, and of course you have got fixing points and also hooks to take away certain goods. Speaking about the rear of the vehicle, let's talk about the rear cabin space, and here the headroom and legroom is absolutely excellent. Someone who's just under 6 foot, I can fully stretch my legs. I've got no issues if I'm sitting normally from the front seat. And as for headroom, if I was even 6'4", potentially even 6'7", I wouldn't even feel hemmed in. As for the middle occupant, it's also great because Audi have integrated a flat floor, meaning that you can have different sorts of sitting styles. Now, as for the middle compartment, if I do pull it out, it does reveal a armrest and two cup holders, and elsewhere for convenience for rear occupants, there's two Type-C ports, although that is part of an option, a 12-volt socket and also dedicated climate controls. Now, at the front of the cabin, it's similarly impressive in terms of headroom and legroom. There's no issues here whatsoever, and here you do have electric lumbar support, although they're manually adjustable seats. It's quite surprising given the price tag of the vehicle that we don't see fully electric seats. Now, elsewhere, it should be mentioned that very much like other Volkswagen vehicles on the market, Audi have gone down the route of integrating a pressure sensor within the front driver's seat, which means it's quite convenient if you're on your own and you're jumping in and out of the vehicle, but as soon as you have other occupants, here the infotainment system and the climate controls will ramp down, and as such the only way to counteract this is to reach over to the center console. Now, that's not a problem if you're sitting at the front, but if you have, let's say, teenagers sitting at the back of the cabin, it's going to be quite cumbersome for them, specifically if it happens quite frequently. And now we get on to driving, and first off I have to talk about cabin noise. Now, the Q4 e-tron is pretty well insulated from the world around, whereby there's minimal amount of noise that creeps in, although it's worth pointing out we do have the acoustic glazing option fitted. Now, when it comes to road noise, however, you do hear some coming in from the tyres, at least from the 20-inch tyres that we've got, and elsewhere you do have a little bit of wind deflecting off the A-pillars. If you want a little bit more information, by the way, I suggest checking the audio review that goes into a little bit more detail in this department. But now let's focus on the suspension. Now, the Q4 e-tron has got a slightly stiffened suspension, To me, it's quite reminiscent of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, whereby you feel the road under you. So therefore, when you're going around potholes or speed bumps or uneven terrain, you're definitely going to feel it. And namely with that road noise that I mentioned just before, it's not exactly a fantastic, well, agreeable experience that you're going to have if you're pottering in and around town. Now don't get me wrong, it's not that bad, but in comparison to other vehicles, namely for example Audi's vehicle, the e-tron SUV, the larger size sibling, it has a floaty like suspension which makes you almost forget the type of terrain you're actually driving on, but that's not what can be said about the Q4 e-tron. Now on the flip side, it does have its advantages, whereby if you're driving at speed on country roads, what you'll find is the Q4 really does give you that bit of confidence. It's very similar to the likes of the Volvo and the likes of the ID4. Now that stiffened suspension setup is better than some of its Volkswagen alternatives, whereby you feel that you can really toss it around corners and not worry too much. Now don't get me wrong, it's not exactly as planted as the like of a saloon, as there is still a little bit of body roll, but it's extremely minimal. Now on the subject of driving around at speed around country roads, it is worth bearing in mind that the Q4 e-tron as standard comes with a rear wheel drive setup. Now if you do want the all-wheel drive setup and you want 2 electric motors, you're going to have to go for the 50 line and therefore splash out over £51,000. Now the model that on review, as I mentioned at the beginning of the review, is the 40 line, and as such we've only got a single rear mounted motor. Therefore we get 150 kilowatts of power, which equates to 201 horsepower, and you get 310 newton meters of torque. Now launching it from 0 to 60 miles an hour, we attained a figure of 7.67 seconds, which is perfectly fine, but then when you put it in the grander scheme of things and you compare it to the likes of, let's say, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, the Q4 e-tron really can't keep up, and as such means that the car is just not as nippy and fast. And I should also mention this car is also limited to 99 miles per hour, which in UK is not a problem whatsoever, but if you're going to be driving on the Autobahn, you'll suddenly feel that 99 miles an hour just feels all that bit limited. Now performance aside, what about when it comes to electric range? Where here there's 2 battery pack models on offer, 58 kilowatt hour and also 82 kilowatt hour. Now we have the latter model on review, the larger battery pack, which has a claimed range of roughly 300 miles, similar to the likes of the VW ID4. However, in realistic driving conditions, what you'll find is the vehicle will achieve roughly 260 miles, at least according to our test, because you can drive like a lunatic and therefore get less mileage, or you can drive a lot more conservatively and then achieve, well, near that 300 mile mark. But given our benchmark is pretty much consistent throughout all vehicles, we can say that VW ID4 also achieves the same sort of figure, and ironically it has the same sort of battery pack as well. Now when you do compare it to its rivals, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin achieves roughly 240 to 250 miles, the Mercedes EQA achieves around 210 to around 230 miles, and then you've got the likes of the Skoda Enyaq iV, which trumps pretty much every electric SUV in its segment and achieves north of 300 miles. So ultimately it depends on how important range is, but in this respect what we'll say is 260 miles is a very respectable figure to achieve in the modern times, and as a result means that, well, driving anxiety, or range anxiety should I say, isn't really a problem. Now for you to be as energy efficient as possible, and indeed for you to recoup energy back into the battery pack, you can initiate B mode. So now this is done via the gear selector. If you shift down, it will initiate B mode and therefore decelerate the car at a greater degree when you lift off the accelerator pedal. Now it should be mentioned that while it does have a somewhat one pedal driving approach, you still do have to initiate the brake pedal, the regular brake pedal, in order to come to a complete standstill, because it will just basically continue rolling at roughly 4 miles an hour. Now if you were to use drive mode instead, where you are basically coasting, you can adjust the regenerative braking level, and here you can use the flappy paddles to go between the 3 different level modes, and this means that there's a little bit of degree of customization, which is nice to see from Audi, and it's almost to be expected because a lot of other electric vehicles do offer such features, and it makes it, well, for a greater experience when you're driving in different conditions. Now for you to recharge at a much more rapid rate, you can of course plug it in, because it is an electric vehicle after all. Now here you've got a CCS input and a Type 2 port, and the former is capable of 125 kilowatts of input on the larger battery pack models. If you go for the smaller battery packs, it will be limited to 100 kilowatts, and nevertheless, no matter which model you go for, it'll go from roughly 5 to 80% in around 38 minutes. Now, finding that sort of charger might be a little bit tricky for some people, even though you can use certain apps or indeed via the built-in navigation system. What I will say here is that most people might be charging this at home or indeed at a workplace. Now, in this scenario, you'll have a 11 kilowatt onboard charger present on the larger battery pack variant and a 7 kilowatt onboard charger on the smaller battery pack variant. Now here the time will really depend in terms of how you are charging or indeed what percentage you're at, but if you're going from 0 to 100%, expect it to be a roughly 8 to 11 hours. Now moving on, we get onto the driver assistance systems, and here it's slightly disappointing because a lot of them come as a extra feature or part of a pack. Now as standard, you get cruise control, you've got lane departure warning, and you've got traffic sign recognition among emergency brake assist and like the emergency systems that are integrated as standard, which one might expect on most modern day vehicles. But if you want the lane departure warning with exit warning, so in other words like blind spot monitoring system, if you want the adaptive cruise control, if you want the fantastic augmented reality system via the head-up display, you're going to have to pay all an extra premium. Now very much on that complaint, it should be mentioned that when it comes to parking, the rear sensors come as standard, but if you want the rear view camera, you're going to have to pay extra, and yes, that is included on a 50-odd thousand pound car, let alone the base trim, which comes in at 40,000 pounds. I just really was expecting at least the rear view camera to come as standard and be fitted, because you see it on many cheaper vehicles, but that's not the case with the Q4 e-tron. Now on the plus side, when it comes to visibility, I have absolutely no problems when it comes to parking at the front, at the side, at the rear. It's all phenomenal, and I even do like the fact that Volkswagen Group has integrated a small cutout in most of their vehicles, and here what you'll find is that by the A-pillars it means it's a little bit easier to see. And so this all brings me on to my verdict. Would I recommend the Q4 e-tron over its rivals? Well, in comparison to the Mercedes EQA, yes I would, because it offers better range and it has all the same sort of premium features. But then would I buy it over the likes of the Volvo XC40 Recharge Twin Pro, other than being a mouthful to say? No, because the Volvo offers pretty much double the performance and has a similar type of range as the Audi. Elsewhere in the Volkswagen Group, you've got the likes of the Skoda Enyaq iV, which offer even more range and then also has a bigger boot, making it a little bit more practical for medium to larger size families. Then if you look elsewhere, you've got the likes of the Kia e-Niro, the Kia Soul EV and the Hyundai Kona Electric, which all come at roughly £32,000, offer fantastic range, and while performance isn't exactly their key selling point, it will be a great option for those people who are going to be looking to potter around town or indeed want to get on the electric bandwagon. Quite frankly, I think these other vehicles should be your consideration, and if you want to see our detailed reviews, do check them down in the description below. Now, if you've got any questions, or indeed if you want to share your own opinions on these vehicles, do let us know in the comment section below. And if you've liked this video, make sure you drop a like and of course subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with the latest reviews. I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye.